Today we're going to make a French seafood stew called Bouillabaisse. And it's going to be a version that is easy and Midwest because I live in the Midwest and we don't have access to fresh seafood. Now, just know, however, I'm not talking about bouilla, which my husband gets a little confused sometimes. This is a bouillabaisse that is inspired by a trip that we took to San Francisco a few years ago, where I absolutely fell in love with the fresh Cioppino and seafood stews that they had there. So of course I came home with a food memory and wanted to make something similar. I'm Dorothy, and before we get started cooking, I want to go over something that's really confusing to a lot of people, that is the difference between bouillabaisse, Cioppino, and just your basic seafood chowder. Bouillabaisse is a French classic, and one thing that you have to have with bouillabaisse is saffron and fennel. And it is more, the broth is different than Cioppino. The broth is more of a white fish stock broth with some tomatoes thrown in. Whereas Cioppino is a very deep tomato broth. So that's one difference. Now, if you want to get really technical, you cannot make a classic French bouillabaisse outside of Provence, because Provence has a fish called scorpion fish that is indigenous to Provence, and that's what makes the authentic bouillabaisse. However, we are not that technical. Now, if we're talking just a seafood chowder, most of the chowders, the broth is a cream base. Okay, so we've got cream base for seafood chowder, a wine and fish stock base for bouillabaisse, and a deep tomato base for Cioppino. As far as the fish goes in all of them, it's very similar. The only thing to know is you should not use oily fish like salmon or mackerel or sardines. Stick with white fish. I've got these from Costco. I'm going to use a little bit of halibut. I'm going to try some orange roughy and maybe a little Atlantic cod. And then I'm going to use some shrimp and some mussels. Now you could put in scallops too, or crab, but this is plenty of fish for today. What's really important to all three of these, or any seafood stew that you're making, is a good stock and don't overcook the fish, okay? So now, with regards to the fish, all of these are frozen. It's really easy and quick to defrost frozen fish. Just put it in a little warm water and you're good to go in minutes. Okay, so while that fish is defrosting, I'll briefly go over what else is going to be in the bouillabaisse. Fennel, we're going to use the bulb and the fronds. Some clam juice, and you need two of these. I didn't have two, so I'm going to drain these minced clams and use that broth also. You need some saffron. Saffron is very expensive, but you don't need very much of it. Some white wine, some olive oil, celery, tomatoes, tomato paste, and your herbs. I'm going to use thyme, garlic, and some parsley. And then last but not least, to add to the fennel flavor, in France they would use Pernod. Pernod's very expensive, so any anise flavored liqueur will work. I had some Sambuca on hand, so I'm going to use Sambuca. You could also use ouzo or something that's called Pétis. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but an anise flavored liqueur. Pernod if you want to be authentic. Okay, so while the fish is unthawing, I'm going to do a little something that I saw on another video. I'm a big fan of Bart's Fish Tales, and he put in a pinch of saffron, which you should use with bouillabaisse, but he put it in about a half cup of wine and let it sit for about 30 minutes while the fish is unthawing or while he was doing something else. Apparently this gives it more color and more flavor, so it's worth a try. Okay, so while the saffron is soaking and the fish are soaking, I cut up 3 stalks of celery, 1 fennel bulb, and 4 cloves of garlic. And we're going to saute all that up right now. Okay, to the stove. Everything is chopped and open and ready to go. So we're going to add some oil for the saute. Okay, we'll let that heat up a little bit over medium-high, and then we're going to add the celery, the chopped fennel, and let that saute for about 3 minutes, and then add the garlic. So, celery. It's hot enough, you hear the sizzle. Fennel. You don't want to add the garlic quite yet because garlic will burn pretty quickly. So the last minute or so, we'll add the garlic. So we'll just saute this for about 5 minutes now. Now let's add the garlic. Saute that up for about a minute. It doesn't take very long. And then we're going to add most of the other ingredients except for the fish. So I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. The tomato paste will help the tomatoes bring out the flavor a little bit. I'm going to add a can of tomatoes, some sprigs of thyme. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of the sambuca or pernod or whatever you are using. That will bring out the fennel flavor more. And then I forgot to tell you that we want some the zest of a half an orange to add. That's classic with the bouillabaisse also. Turn off the timer. Okay, and next up is the wine and saffron. And then the broth. On the fish broth, I had an 8-ounce jar of the clam juice, some more juice from a can of clams, and then I added another cup of wine and some water to fill it out to be 4 cups. And there you have it. Now, the only thing left to add is the fish, but we're going to let this broth simmer for about 20 minutes to get all the flavors blended together. Okay, so this has been cooking, simmering for about 20 minutes. So it should be nice and blended, all the seasoning coming out. So now we're going to add the fish. So the fish I've cut into about 2-inch pieces, bite size if you will. Okay, so I'm going to add those, the white fish first, the mussels, and the shrimp second. So these will cook for about, not very long, 2 or 3 minutes. And now I'm going to add the prawns. And these are really easy to tell when they're done because they will turn pink. Now if you're using some that are already cooked, you only want them in there for a few minutes. I'm also going to add some mussels. I'm going to turn the timer on. See, they're already starting to turn pink. Turn the timer on for maybe 2 minutes and then we are done. One thing you don't want to forget is the salt and pepper, which I did. Ideally, put in the salt and pepper midway through cooking so that you can taste as you go and get it to your liking. All right, looks like it's time to eat. Okay, I think I'll give it a little taste before serving to the family. That broth is perfect. I love the notes of anise, but it's very, very subtle. So next week, let's try the Cioppino and do a little comparison, okay? Cheers.